Hi, I'm Adam Hopkins. I am the marketing chair for the Society for Applied Spectroscopy, and I have with me today Dr. Joseph Razzell Hollis of the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and we're going to be talking today about his involvement in the Perseverance Mars rover project and a little bit about how it is that he got here, because it's the kind of thing and the kind of place that few spectroscopists get to go. So thank you, Joe or Joseph, for being here with me today.
It's awesome to be here.
So right off the bat, let me just ask you to briefly describe your involvement with the Perseverance rover project.
Okay, yeah, so I am a postdoctoral scientist at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I'm specifically working on Sherlock, which is one of the spectrometers on board the rover. I've been at JPL for just over 3 years now, so I've had the opportunity to be involved in the project kind of at the finalization stage, right? So it was when they were sort of putting together the last parts of the rover, assembling the whole thing, shipping it off to the launch site, and then, of course, launching it and landing it. And now my job primarily focuses on getting ready to interpret the data that we're going to be getting back very shortly.
So you mentioned a couple of things in some earlier discussion that we had before starting to film, and I noted a couple things that you've said about sort of skills and pathways and things. And so I'm curious, how is it that you came to be involved in this project? Because it's not something that the average freshly minted PhD physical chemist or analytical spectroscopist does.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story, I think, for me. I don't think I took the most direct path to where I am today. I guess I could go over my background. So yeah, I did an undergraduate degree in chemistry, specializing in theoretical chemistry. So I was doing simulations of molecular structures. I then went on to do a PhD in what is known as plastic electronics. I was basically studying new kinds of materials, these semiconducting organic polymers that were being used to make kind of a next generation solar cells. And that's where I learned Raman spectroscopy. And that was kind of the primary tool of my PhD, was studying the way these organic molecules, these polymers and fullerene molecules interacted with each other, how they self-organize themselves into like solid films. I've spent 3.5 years just studying that, and that's where I kind of really got my teeth into Raman, and I learned that I'm fascinated by the technique. The spectroscopy has always interested me. The interaction of light and matter and what they can tell you about them both it really appeals to me. So, I mean, technically I'm an astrobiologist now, but I never studied astronomy and I never studied biology. I am actually really a spectroscopist, and so after I finished my PhD, I got in touch with Dr. Luther Beagle, who is the PI of Sherlock, and basically said, I see that you're hiring postdocs. Would you be interested in a Raman spectroscopist? Who I made some headway into doing quantitative Raman for these organic solar cell materials, and I wanted to see if I could apply that to the interpretation of deep UV Raman spectra from Mars, so in the hope of possibly being able to more formally identify molecules from their spectra, or to deconvolute mixtures into their separate components. So I submitted that proposal, and I got funded for what's known as a NASA postdoctoral fellowship. So I got very lucky, and I was able to come out to California and start my work, and they very kindly kept me on for an extra 1.5 years so far. So it's been a great process, and I think it is fundamentally it's the same challenges, right? It's understanding what's really going on with the technique. How is the light being injected into the sample by the instrument? How is that interacting with the molecules in the sample, how is that, and producing light itself, and then how is that light getting back into the spectrometer to produce the spectrum you're seeing. So, one of the papers that I've been able to publish was actually in Applied Spectroscopy, and it was an optical model that I had developed to describe exactly how the light from our laser, which is quite unusual, it's not a traditional Gaussian beam laser, it's got this annular thing, so it kind of looks like a smoke ring. So it's this elliptical beam where the majority of your intensity is quite far from the center. And as that passes through the sample space and goes in and out of focus, you get a very different kind of volume that you're investigating. So I was able to determine kind of exactly how that light interacted with that volume and how that image projected through the instrument onto the detector influenced, for example, the signal you get, the width of the peaks, that kind of thing. And it was an attempt to try to quantify, exactly how much signal do you get, and how far into the sample will your laser penetrate. And it was fascinating. It was the most mathematical work I'd ever done. I was quite proud of myself. I integrated so many equations.
Yeah, I think when I think back to my past of doing instrument design and longer range spectroscopy, I always just assumed a Gaussian, even though I knew it wasn't true. Use an excimer laser, it is not a round Gaussian beam, and depending on how you project and everything else, but good enough was kind of the thing.
I find this work really rewarding. I mean, spectroscopy in general, because I swear, in a month does not go by without me learning something new that complicates things, but improves my understanding of how this stuff is really going on. So, like you said, I remember during my PhD doing estimations of the volume that you're probing, and you just assume it's a cylinder. You just assume that your beam is a certain size and it's just going through the sample and it's staying the same size, because treating it as a hyperboloid is just too complicated. But it is possible to do a more fundamental and more thorough analysis as long as you can put the time in and work out what those equations are.
That is hardcore physical chemistry that does take me back to nightmares from graduate school. I'm gonna be honest. That takes me back to nightmares of calculating beam overlaps for nonlinear optical spectroscopies and trying to then tease out what my sample volumes were going to be. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna have to have a drink or something after this, or maybe my graduate advisor will see this at some point and say, "Oh, wow, yeah, that's right. Those are hard problems."
Unfortunately, the final equation that I came up with to describe the propagation of the laser intensity through the sample volume spanned 2 or 3 lines of text. It was quite impressive. It's just every
amazing.
time, as I was developing the model, I was just like, oh, I haven't accounted for that, and then that added another term, and it just got longer and longer and longer. But it has really helped us understand, for example, the actual, one of the concerns we have is obviously we're using an ultraviolet laser. We can damage material. We can cause photobleaching if we're not careful. So, we fire these pulses, and actually the total intensity is very, very low compared to a visible laser you would use for Raman normally. We have the advantage that Raman scattering tends to increase with the frequency of the excitation to the power of 4. So by using a UV laser, we can use much, much less power and get the same signal. But we're still potentially damaging material. But by fully understanding the shape, the size and shape of the beam spot, and not just treating it as a perfect circle, but actually recognizing how that intensity changes across the space, we can get a much clearer idea of exactly how much energy we're introducing to the sample, per cubic micron.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Joseph, for taking the time to talk to me, and uh, and being interested in astrobiology and spectroscopy, and doing something different. I bet you're certainly the first person I've ever met with that job title now. And so I thank you very much for the time, and look forward to reading your upcoming article in Applied Spectroscopy, and maybe I'll go back and look at the other one on beam propagation as well, just to get the full context. And I want to see this 3-line equation if it's in there. So thanks, and thank you for the work, and keep going and looking at what's out there.
Oh, and well, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.